All right, welcome to the slideshow. I'm Dakota Jackson. I'm a trombonist here in New Orleans, and I'm devoted to cultivating an interest and appreciation of the trombone. And I have my co hosts, Ben and Jared, with me, doing a little three-way pod. We're all in different locations, and I'll let you go first. How you doing, Jared?
I'm doing well. I'm Jared. I am a trombonist based in Salt Lake City. I got my undergrad at Utah Valley University in commercial music, and I've been working in Salt Lake doing trombone stuff since.
And Ben?
Yeah, I'm Ben Wiltz. I'm over here in Batesville, Arkansas at the time. I'm a grad school dropout. I played bass trombone. I still do play bass trombone in community groups, and I'm a fishing guide as well. And yeah, I love getting to talk trombone. We've been doing this for a while. It's just nice to get to explore and learn some new topics.
Hell yeah, man. Well, this week, let's gonna go through the stuff here. We're doing trombone in the news. Normally, we kind of pull up some crazy, obscure thing about scaring away a bear or a robot playing a trombone. It's been a lot of wild stuff, that I really think about it. Little past ones, but this one we're gonna talk about Trombone Day that just happened at Southern Miss. Partially because I was there, which was pretty cool. And if you want to hear about my experience with it, me and Ben talked about it on the Patreon. You should go over and check that out. Which I still need to do like a part two of that because there was so much that happened. But it was very cool. It was kind of like a scaled down version of ITF, but it was nice because it was one day. So there was Colin Williams, who's in the New York Phil, the assistant principal trombonist, and Marshall Jilks, who I think needs no introduction, but obviously just an absolutely incredible trombonist. They both played, they both did master classes, and they both did Q&As. There was also a composer arranger there who did some stuff, and there was a little bit of vendor stuff going on. There was Shires was there. They also did like a how to pick out a horn when you go somewhere, which was kind of interesting. And then Giddings was there, which I believe was formerly Giddings and Webster, which is just Giddings now, I think. Me and Ben have kind of talked about this a little bit. He knows a little bit more than I do. I think he owns one. And Greg Black was there, and Greg Black also did a little thing talking about mouthpieces, so that was very cool. It was a lot of fun. It was a really cool day. Learned a lot, got inspired, all that cool stuff. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Ben McElwain, the trombone professor there. He was the one who put it on. Really good trombonist, by the way. I heard him play with Colin. He sounded great. And I'm sure it's a lot of work getting that all together, but I really appreciated it. For me, it was only an hour and a half drive, so it was an easy no-brainer. But I recommend it if you're able to make it to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That's where the University of Southern Miss is at, but very cool. While I'm on the topic, talking about the Patreon, normally during this period we'd do some like corny beer advertising thing. We did that for a little while, which is a lot of fun. But I'm not going to do any kind of advertising. Just tell you guys that we got the Patreon going. We've picked up some more Patreons recently, building a pretty cool community over there, and I really like the content we're doing. It's a bit different from the podcast. It's a little more unscripted, a little more just off the cuff video talking about whatever, doing deep dives and stuff. Still trombone related, but way less researched out. And if you want to, you get to see our faces, which is either going to be a surprise or a disappointment. I don't really know what you got built up from these voices, but but you can go see our voices over there. I also do some cool stuff. There's videos. There's a We post all the videos and everything over there. We also have some. We do like playlists for every episode that comes out, and occasionally I'll just post a little extra content in there. So yeah, a lot of stuff getting put up there. It's real cheap, but it helps us a lot. It goes towards keeping this pod up. It like cost me money to put this out, and doing Zoom and all that. So we'd really appreciate it. I think you'd dig it if that's something you're into. Um, Getting into the topic for this week, it's Ben Van Dijk. If you don't know who Ben Van Dijk is, I guess you're about to learn, about to do a full episode. But I was pretty excited about this. We switched over to doing an episode thing. This will be episode 2 of this season. Episode 1 was Earl Williams. Um, and I'm not really sure exactly how we came to Ben Van Dijk, but there's a bunch of jumping between trombonist and gear. As we know, you guys love the gear. But I wanted to do a bass trombone player, and I've been talking to Ben about this. I think that Ben's probably my, not Ben, my co-host, but Ben Van Dijk is probably my favorite bass trombonist. He's a little bit better than Ben. Not a lot, though. I don't want to get crazy. Um, But yeah, Ben Van Dijk is a phenomenal trombone player.
Yeah, man. I'll be honest. Ben Van Dijk was very, very influential on me when I was a blossoming trombonist. Really was a fan of his style. He really has a I don't know how to explain it. Just very light on his feet as a bass trombonist. His melodic line, like I guess his yeah, he just plays very melodically. Very
No, I was gonna say I do think that that's a good way to describe it. He is really melodic. It's very clear that like singing through the horn is his primary objective. He doesn't get too rooted in the fact that he's playing the bass trombone. I don't mean that in a bad way, but and it's not always a bad thing. You talk about this another time, but sometimes you're playing the bass trombone, you want to play loud and heavy because you have a big old instrument, and I think that that's not necessarily always his objective. He really sings through the horn, even if it is at a higher volume. Um, I want to start here. We're gonna go through his whole life, and then we're gonna talk about the horns he played and his YouTube presence, all that kind of stuff. But I'm gonna start at the very beginning. He was born in Hague, which is a city in the Netherlands. And I actually, when I was doing this, I went off some weird tangents, and Hog was one of them. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to kind of go into some weird deep dives, which I kind of figure is what you're here for, anyways, if you're listening to this. But just be aware that I'm going to go off on some pretty weird tangents. First of all, I unfortunately have not really known that much about the Netherlands previous to the last couple of years, and for some reason, the last couple of years, it's become a lot more prevalent in my life. Part of that is chess. I know that sounds a little weird, but I've learned a little bit about the Netherlands, and I was pretty interested in Hague. Hague is the third largest city in the Netherlands, behind the first, of course, being Amsterdam, the capital, and Rotterdam is the second largest city. And Hague is the third largest, which is actually the Hague. It's not. I keep saying Hague, but it's the Hague. In it's Den Haag. I also find it interesting that if you look at the spelling in English, it's Hague, where in the native language it's Haag. I don't know why that gets changed. I always think about stuff like that whenever it gets moved over. I'm pretty sure we could have just went with Haag and everyone would have known. I'm not really sure what the spelling change was all about, but for English speakers it is Hague, but it's the Hague or Den Haag. It's also, I found out that South Holland is like one of the most densely populated places on the planet, and there's a lot of cool stuff with like royalty and stuff going on there. Also, a lot of people consider it like the de facto capital of the Netherlands, even though Amsterdam's obviously the capital. When I say de facto capital, that was me looking up stuff on the internet. If you're from Amsterdam and find that offensive, I have literally no knowledge. As an American, I I have no vested interest in that. So if
I feel like that makes sense though.
yeah, for sure. I know there's a lot of places like that, like for example, Missouri. Jefferson City is the capital of Missouri. I only know that because I'm from Missouri. That's not something I expect you to know. But Jeff City, as the locals call it, Jeff City, is not the most happening city in Missouri. I wouldn't shame you for thinking that it was even somewhere like St. Louis or Kansas City. It is Jefferson City. So maybe that's what's going on. But Amsterdam's obviously a big city too. So no.
It's kind of like I feel like New Orleans is the same way with that with Baton Rouge. Like when outside of Louisiana, most people are talking about New Orleans, or even like California with Los Angeles. It's not the capital, but it's definitely like the hub.
Yeah, for sure. That that being said, Amsterdam is obviously a big and famous city. The reason that the hog thing is more important, though, is because of a lot of things tie in here. But Ben's father was Pete Van Dijk, and this is the first person who taught him how to play trombone. And Pete Van Dijk was a really accomplished trombonist himself, and he was a soloist in the Hague Philharmonic Orchestra, which that's what we call it. It's actually called the Hague Resident Orkest. Orkest is how they say orchestra. Which a residency orchestra, right? Which I assume translates to residential orchestra. And I actually did a little deep diving on this orchestra just because there was information out there, and I'll kind of get into a second why I find this interesting. But the official launch date of the orchestra was a Sunday afternoon, November 20th, 1904. Henry Viotta was the first maestro they had, and he did it in the Building for Arts and Sciences. I think this is pretty crazy because I don't know. It's crazy to me how long orchestras have been around. 1904 is quite a minute ago. And while I think we have this thought that like orchestras just last forever and they're just super old, like how long do rock bands stay together? Like, I mean, even some people can't even make it 2 months. And think about how many people are in orchestra. I don't think it's insignificant that it's been there since 1904. I think a lot of that was talking about the beginning of the orchestra, was in part to Henry Viotta, who I guess spent 12 years trying to make it happen. And he was a lawyer, composer, conductor, and conservatory director. There's a conservatory in Hague, which we'll talk about. But he did it to have music in the community. We also know that the first program there included Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony and Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, which I also think is super cool that like you can look at the history of the orchestra and know the first piece that they played. And since that's in 1904, that's pretty neat. The current trombonists there are Timothy Dowling and Arno Shipdam. Timothy Dowling is actually Australian. I did a little bit of looking into him. I always find it interesting when we do these pods and somebody like this comes up because I was thinking about this. It's hard to say how good this guy is at trombone. I'm sure he's fantastic, but he doesn't get as much exposure as other people. It's like he's good enough to have an orchestra job, and he's been there since 1988, I believe. Let me check that real fast. Yeah, he's been there since 1988, which is a long time. And I think about this in the scape of the orchestral scene, that a trombone, like a symphony philharmonic orchestra in Hague, Netherlands, would have a trombonist from Australia as their principal. I mean, it really gives you an idea of how global the landscape is for orchestra spots. And this guy's been doing this for a long time. It's kind of cool to shed a little bit of light on him. He's also currently teaching in Hague, which we'll get to as well. But talking about Pete Van Dijk, he was a soloist with the group, and he was also a soloist with the Marine Band of the Royal Navy. He was with the Royal Navy in 1947, and 10 years later he moved to the Hague Philharmonic, where he was a soloist from 1957 all the way to 1982. And he soloed on tenor trombone and tenor tuba, which the tenor tuba is essentially a euphonium. I guess people, when they see a tenor tuba, typically think rotors. I did a little bit of research on this. This is the slideshow, so I'm not like, if we get it wrong, whatever. This isn't the rotor or the valve show. But I did do a little bit of research on the difference between tenor tuba and euphonium, and I think that they're used interchangeably a lot now. I went to some like tuba forums to check this shit out, so if you don't agree with me, like, that's fine. Go argue with them. But unlike the baritone, the tenor tuba and the euphonium are both conical, I believe. What's up, Ben?
So I was going to say, in terms of the tenor tuba, things like that, at the time there was the tuba was, or is still, the youngest brass instrument. And actually the first tuba made was a tenor tuba. So that's interesting. That's interesting. But at the time you were seeing a lot of like small tubas in C as well that might have 6 valves on them, things like that. They might be tubas that were like pitched in the tenor range around trombone, something similar to that. Like the little tuba, the French tuba in C had 6 valves, and it was pitched a step higher than trombone, but could go much lower because of all the valves. There were some things like that because a lot of French music and a lot of bass trombone repertoire would play music that was like designed for these C tubas, things like that. But anyways, yeah. So there was a ton of different types of tubas at the time. Like we didn't get the standard 4 that we got now for a while.
There you go. Ben is our resident tuba expert. He actually played tuba before trombone. I'm a trombone purist, pure blood, if you will. Trombone from beginning to end. I actually, they tried to switch me to tuba like in junior high, and I said no way. So that's how I'm sitting in front of you guys now. It's my strong will. But
I can't say the same. I switched in high school to tuba for a bit.
Wow, bro. That's even
Well,
worse
no.
than Ben. Ben just
We're
got
all
wise.
I can thank my French tuba knowledge because of bass trombone repertoire. My teacher when I was over at Northwestern State was a French music. That was his specialty. Was French music bass trombone for bass trombone, and he commonly had like whole like folders full of music specifically for that French tuba in C, which was a tenor. Would technically be a tenor tuba, since it's pitched 1 octave above like a modern C tuba.
Yeah, well, whatever the case may be, Pete Van Dijk played one, and he played the trombone. So I'd imagine that it was similar to tenor trombone in terms of mouthpiece, at least for him to be a soloist on both. I say that he could have been good at switching over, but yeah, he was a notable soloist on both. He also played under some pretty notable conductors, Antil Dorati, Otto Kempler, Litter Bernstein. I'm pretty familiar with that one, maybe because I'm an American. Carlo Maria Gillini, Pierre Boulez, another pretty famous one, Claudio Abbado, and Carl Boehm. And another pretty notable thing that he did that I thought was kind of interesting was he played the solo in the Mahler's Third Symphony in 1960 under William von Otterloo, and that was the first time the symphony was performed in Holland after the Second World War. And I guess it received a lot of praise in the newspapers and stuff. But I think it's a super cool nugget. And I guess after retirement, he continued to play pretty frequently, according to Ben. After his Ben Van Dijk, of course. After his family, the trombone was the most important thing in his life. And he passed away in 2006 at the age of 82. And I think the ITA, the International Trombone Association, gave him like a lifetime award, which I think was a pretty big deal for him. Ben Van Dijk said it was a pretty big deal for him. It is kind of weird that his most notable achievement is that his son was Ben Van Dijk. he definitely launched a bass trombone monster onto the world, but he was a really accomplished trombone player in his own right. I mean, none of that is anything to put your nose up at. Being a soloist, which I think is kind of an interesting concept. I don't want to get too far into this, but there haven't been a lot of trombone players that were primarily soloists, especially before Christian Limburg. And certainly those guys aren't traditional soloists in the way that Christian Limburg is, but it is an interesting concept. Arnold Jacobs kind of comes to mind as a really early one. But
Arthur
I know there's
Pryor
also a
trombone. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
did I say Arnold Jacobs?
Yeah.
My bad. Sorry, y'all. I meant Arthur Pryor. I have Arnold Jacobs on the mind. Famous tuba player in Chicago. I know. I'm sorry.
We got to chill
some-
out on all the tuba talk. This is a weird episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna leave all this in here so you guys can hear about this. I do apologize. I know there's some pretty avid Arnold Jacob fans out there. Ben Van Dijk being one of them. Yeah. So I did not mean to offend. I did find a pretty cool picture of Pete Van Dijk. I found this, I believe, on Ben Van Dijk's website. He does kind of look similar to Ben Van Dijk. It's kind of tough to say what he's playing. He's definitely got the tall Dutch look going on. It doesn't have a trigger on it, which kind of tracks for the time. Um, and I don't know. Other than it being really small, it's hard for me to tell. He does have a ton of wrapping on it, like on the brace and then the part around his neck, which I think is kind of interesting. Um,
So
but yeah, Ben, what's up?
I was kind of wondering about the wrapping thing as well. Do you? I was about to say, do you think it was had to do with the fact that these unlacquered horns would possibly corrode and get on these nice fancy suits they're wearing?
Um, I don't know. I don't think it's much different than now. I mean, we're definitely in conjecture now. I will say that with the pod, we tried to do a lot of research, and I'm definitely just guessing at the moment. But
That's
I didn't see everyone with them in the time period, so I don't think that would be it. But possibly, I don't know. I don't know the history of lagering horns either. Maybe we could do a whole episode on that when that became commonplace. You look like you have ideas, Ben.
sorry. Yeah, that sounds good. That's never even thought of that.
Maybe that'll be a super techie episode for you guys who really love the gear. Maybe we'll talk about the history of lacquering. But so yeah, so Ben Van Dijk grows up with Pete Van Dijk as his father, and I'm sure that helped guide him a lot in terms of his trombone life. And in 1980, he graduated from the Royal Conservatory in Hague. Um, I do want to kind of point out that there is the Royal College of Music or something like that, which is like in Canada and then in London. This is a separate institution, which like in the Netherlands, it's called the. Forgive me, there's no way I'm going to say this correctly, but like Koninklijke, I don't even know. Conservatorium, so it's KC, so it's not the same. There's just no way I can pronounce that right. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, the Royal Conservatory in Hague in 1980, which was actually founded in 1826 by King William the First, and it's the oldest conservatory in the Netherlands. Um, and in 2021, which is very recent, obviously, it became home to the Amer, which houses the Resonant Orchestra, which is what we were talking about earlier, the Hague Resonant Orchestra, the one that uh, Ben Van Dijk's father was a member of. And its current faculty are Timothy Dowling, Brantatima, a pretty huge name, who's currently a guest professor there, I guess. So he's probably like just doing the year or something. I don't know how that works out. Ben Van Dijk teaches there, and Daniel Quayles Cassant and Sabant Kimmer teaches just orchestral parts, which I think is kind of interesting. Timothy Dowling is the trombonist who is currently principal in the resident orchestra, so that's why he's there. But I do think it's interesting that we saw the that Ben Van Dijk's father, Pete Van Dijk, played in the Hague Residential Orchestra, and then the principal trombonist of that now teaches at the same place that Ben Van Dijk teaches. Like, all this is kind of a nice little web that ties together. But at a pretty young age, Ben Van Dijk was appointed bass trombonist of the Netherlands and the bass trombonist of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in the Netherlands in 1976, which, if you paid attention a second ago, was before he graduated college. So he graduated in 1980, but got the job in 1976. And he was actually there for 23 years before joining the Rotterdam Philharmonic, which he was also in for 23 years, which I think is pretty interesting. They did 23 years at both. And I guess while he was in the orchestra, he studied with Jeff Reynolds and Roger Bobo. Jeff Reynolds was the bass trombonist for the LA Philharmonic at the time, and Roger Bobo is a incredibly famous tuba player. I feel like kind of like a famous soloist and definitely a famous educator. Ben is our our resident expert. I think he believes that he lives in Mexico now, actually. But do you have any thoughts on Roger Bobo, Ben?
Yeah, incredible soloist. I do remember when I first started playing tuba, and or at least going to UAM when I was taking tuba lessons, at least. Got introduced to some tuba music. Roger Bobo was one of the first names to come up. So yeah, incredible soloist. I've seen some different things with him. I believe I saw though a post about a week, no, probably a month ago. I believe he passed away, and I think he was down in Mexico.
Yeah, it does look like he died last month, actually, February 12th of 2023. So a very recent pass away. But yes, certainly a legend of the tuba. After being in the Netherlands Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, Ben Van Dijk went to the Rotterdam Philharmonic Orchestra, where he retired, like, I guess 2021 or 2022. But after 23 years, I was trying to do the math on that. He just retired. And while in that orchestra, he played under a lot of famous conductors: Valery Gergiev, Yannick Nezet-Segun, Sir Simon Rattle, Lahav Sani, and a bunch of others. And during this whole period, he also taught at the Royal Conservatoire of Music in Hague. But the current section, I just wanted to do this on both these because I thought this was kind of interesting. The current section for both these orchestras, for the Rotterdam Philharmonic, it's Pierre Volders, Alexander Verbeek. They're both listed as principal. I'm sure one of them's principal, one of them's co-principal. That's pretty common. Remco de Jager and Romert Groenhoff. I did see the listing for the audition for the Rotterdam Philharmonic bass trombone spot, and it did require that you played contrabass, which me and Ben talked about. This is probably due to the fact that Ben Van Dijk plays a lot of contrabass, which we'll get into. But I do think that's interesting that was a requirement. I don't think that's super typical of bass trombone spots to require contrabass as part of their repertoire. And the trombone section for the Netherlands Royal Philharmonic Orchestra is currently Harry de Lang, Wim Hendricks, and Wouter Isager. I just want to talk try and talk about Ben Van Dijk. It's a little weird because he's still alive. I know that sounds weird, but like a lot of people, when they live and they died, you can kind of summarize their life in periods and talk about what they did. But like with Ben Van Dijk in particular, it's like an ongoing work. I just want to talk about his significance with ITA. He was the president of ITA from 2017 to 2020. I'm not entirely sure who the current president is. I know it was just Joseph Alessi, but I'm not entirely sure if he still is or not. In 2003, he won the ITA award, which is like the highest award you can win. And in 2017, he won the Neil Humfield Award for teaching. And he was invited as a soloist and it was invited as a soloist and a teacher in ITF in Detmold, Denmark, 1992, Cleveland in the U.S., 94, Utrecht in the Netherlands in 2000, Denton, which is in Texas, in 2002, Birmingham in the UK in 2006, and Austin in the US in Texas again in 2010. He was also the first vice president for the ITA in 2014, which is pretty cool. Get down here. Oh shit, I forgot to mention this stuff about Jeff Reynolds. I can throw it in. I was gonna also say here, I was kind of scrolling through some stuff here. I wanted to take a second to talk about Jeff Reynolds, who he studied with in LA. I didn't personally know a ton about him, which I think that there's, with the emergence of the internet, people are really well documented now. Certainly people at high levels of things, and they weren't necessarily as well documented previously. So there's a lot of like people I probably should know that I don't know from kind of like even just the generation before me. But he was a founder of the Moravian Trombone Choir of Downey, California. And I saw it as a bass trombone workbook that I'm kind of considering buying because it looks really interesting. It's called workbook, and I think that's intentional. It's not just exercises. I guess there's a lot of stuff in there about preparing for auditions and trying to be like a working musician. So I think that's kind of interesting. But yeah, currently he's just Ben Van Dijk is just a bass trombonist and soloist. I'm gonna take a second here and talk about his albums, and I'm just gonna kind of go into his albums as a leader because there's a good amount of stuff here, and then we'll kind of talk about some other stuff. There's the album Never Alone, which has Entrada, Never Alone, Concertino, Rhapsody Flamenca, Capriccio, My Spanish Heart, Cancon para Cas Abuelo, Canción para Cas, and some kind of interesting stuff here. First, working backwards here, Canción para Cas is written by Abuelo Van Dijk, which is for trombone and two flamenco guitars. I was kind of having trouble figuring out who Abuelo Van Dijk is. Abuelo is Spanish for grandfather, I believe. Is that correct, Ben? Ben's Spanish is a lot better than mine.
Yes, it is.
So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. He also plays flamenco guitar, which the flamenco in here is him playing. He's really into flamenco. He owns a Paco de Lucia flamenco guitar. Paco de Lucia, if you're not familiar, I actually learned about him through Ben Van Dijk, is a really phenomenal flamenco guitarist. I think he was kind of a national hero in Spain, and is considered one of the greatest flamenco guitarists of all time. He also has a video where he's playing a flamenco guitar that his son built, Eric Van Dijk. I'm not really sure if that is Eric's full-time profession, but certainly it's a big part of his life. And the other thing I want to kind of talk about, I guess there's also, I want to say that a lot of this, Capriccio, for example, is bass trombone with trombones like that. There's Never Alone is trombone with trombone quartet. And Entrada Verhelst is 12 trombones, tenors, and contra. So he plays a lot of music for trombone ensembles, which I always think is cool. Obviously, this is a trombone-centric pod, so we get into a lot of that. But a lot of his stuff is composed by Steven Verhelst, who is a really prominent composer in the trombone forum. You'll see a lot of big names playing his stuff. He is Dutch as well. He studied in Amsterdam. I'm not sure if that's where he's from originally, but he certainly spent a lot of time there. And having the Dutch connection, Ben Van Dijk plays a lot of his stuff, and Jorgen van Ryan plays a lot of his stuff. But I've seen Alessi play his stuff before. Definitely a big composer in the trombone area. He is a bass trombonist himself.
We did talk about him, by the way, if you want to hear more about him on the episode that we did on the patron saints of the trombone.
Yeah, that's that's like Ben's favorite episode, so he's always trying to plug it. You guys should go check it out. The other big reason that I mentioned that all that stuff was by Verhelst is that the next album he did, World Concerto for Bass Trombone, which was him playing bass trombone with the Salvation Army's Amsterdam staff band. It's all compositions by Steven Verhelst. World Concertino, Shenandoah, I'm sure that's an arrangement, obviously he didn't compose Shenandoah. Libertango, Oblivion, Escuela, No Subka Manchuri, Oh Boundless Salvation, Song for Japan, which is been a big one in the trombone area for a minute. If you're just now getting to Song for Japan, there's like a YouTube video with a lot of really big trombone players playing it after the tsunami hit Japan that really hurt them with the nuclear disaster. I'm trying to remember who all is in that. It's a ton of people. I know Christian Lemberg's in it. Jorgen van Rien's in it. Joe Alessi's in it. I'm sure Ben Van Dijk's in it. Anyone you can think of was in it. I think Harold Jarvis was in it for a second. Tons of big people in the video. There's a Danzone, which is a 3-moment suite, God So Loved the World, and La Terrara. So yeah, he's done a lot of work with Verhelst. He also did Nana, which is the Spanish word for lullaby. that has Evocation Sonata in F major, New Orleans, which is a piece by Boza, I believe. Is that correct, Ben? Boza, is that how you say his name?
Yes, and the sheet music for New Orleans comes with not just the bass trombone sheet music, but also comes with it for tuba in ut, which means tuba in C, or the little French C tuba that we talked about earlier. So back to the tuba again. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe did you play New Orleans on a recital or something, or at least like while we were in college together?
Uh, I worked it up. Yeah, I worked it up.
Yeah,
I don't believe I ever performed it, but I did work it up. I was a sheet music collector, so I would buy stuff just to play it for fun.
that's a cool piece. I think it's pretty difficult, if memory serves. Um, Sonne di etre une pasa etre. Sorry, I'm sorry if I'm butchering these.
So
If
that
it's not in
is my
English.
favorite.
What's up?
It's Onepa. It is probably my favorite trombone quartet. I played at my senior recital. Really great recording of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's trombone section playing that with Arnold Jacobs as a soloist on that. So yeah, really like that piece as well. And this is a great arrangement. This is a really great recording of it as well. I don't know the players on that one at all. It's a pretty stacked CD.
Yeah, it certainly is. Can I get to that in 1 second here? Mr. Roberts, which is dedicated to George Roberts, who was Mr. Bass Trombone. If you don't know who George Roberts is, go check out our episode on him. We've already covered that one, so go check that out. I don't Mr. Bass Trombone, I think, is the only explanation I need for right now. Dances for tenor and bass, which is him and Joe Alessi. Vaxilla Regis and Locus Iste, which is Ben Van Dijk with Joseph Leslie, David Finlayson, and Don Harwood, who were the New York Phil trombone section at one point. I don't know the exact dates on that, but they were in the section together, which I think is kind of cool. I was thinking about that, like that. There's some credit to, you can go find 3 mega badass trombone players, but I think there's a little bit of added musical intrigue that's brought by them being in a section together already. Not that they're not 3 badass trombone players; they definitely are. They're the New York Phil, so that helps. But yeah, Joe Celeste, David Finlayson, and Don Harwood play with Ben Van Dijk on those. The Moose, Suzanne Aria, and the Chief, which is dedicated to Arnold Jacobs, who we've been talking about a lot, especially since I accidentally said Arnold Jacobs instead of Arthur Pryor earlier. um, and Kenzone, as well as Nana. Sorry, Nana, which is the title track. But it's a pretty cool album. There's another album, Melody, which is an album with an organ. It sounds like they're in a church or something. I was listening to the album earlier. It's like super spacey. When I say spacey, I mean it seems like it's in a room. And he plays a lot of interesting pieces. Some stuff that you probably know really well. It's like Green Sleeves. But it's definitely interesting to hear him with an organ. And then Brezas Andulazas, which is a duet CD with Ilja Reingold, who plays a lot, and he plays a lot of flamenco guitar on there. Him and Ilja Reingold also have like a number of like collab sessions he calls home sessions on his like his Spotify and stuff else. This is music he's put out. But yeah, I think that kind of kind of covers a lot of stuff with Ben Van Dijk. I think thinking about his significance with the bass trombone, like I said, he's my favorite bass trombone player, and a big part of that is just the way that when he plays, it's super lyrical and super musical, and I think that's something he said he learned from his dad. Um, I think for a long time, trombonists have been trying to play like the male voice, just given the natural range of it and singing. I'm sure a lot of instruments have, but it's I think extra prevalent with the bass trombone, given to the natural range falling within the male voice range. Um, and I think he's one of the better trombonists at that currently alive in terms of playing super lyrical and super musical with his like it's a voice. And he does a lot in that area. Um, You guys want to add anything on the impact of Ben Van Dijk in terms of his playing and his playing
Well,
on you?
just whenever you're talking about his style, that was like a big thing for me. Was talking about how melodic, how lyrically he plays. I saw an interview with him and Matthias Varela. He was an Armenian Philharmonic Orchestra, had some YouTube channel. Saw he had an interview with Ben Van Dijk. So I watched it. One of the things he talked about was whenever he first teaches new students, he says he teaches them like five of the most important things, which I always think that's a good way to what somebody thinks is important. That's probably what they're going to work on the most. And his number one thing was sound. So just making a beautiful sound was number one right out the gate. And then I think number two was intonation, and then the next one was musicianship. So then he was at dynamics and other things after that. So I don't know. I think that really shows like why he sounds like that, and it's probably because he values that.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of his students, right? Who
Yes.
did the interview? Yeah, we were kind of talking about that too. I know we mentioned that he won the ITA award for teaching, which is the Neil Humfield Award in 2017. And I was also talking about Ben. I don't know if you're crazy into the trombone world, you probably remember this, but a couple years ago there was a bass trombonist playing this piece called "Fly or Die," and Lionel Flameau, or yeah, is that right? Lionel, is that his
Yeah,
name?
Lionel Fimo, and he was making his way into almost the non-musician side of Facebook. You started seeing people who you wouldn't expect to post that video.
Yeah, I remember it really did. It really did get trendy. I remember I was at my buddy Stewart's place in New Orleans. He was a bass player, and his roommate was a bass player, and his roommate. Olas Otterwan, very cool dude. Shout out. Uh, was sitting there scrolling, and he showed me the video, and he was like, "Look at this guy," and I was like, "Wow, like this really is getting to all corners now." Bass players are sitting here listening to these bass trombone players. But yeah, it was called Fly or Die, and it's this really crazy piece, and he's like playing hella fast and really crazy technical. That guy was a student of Ben Van Dijk's. I don't know. He does have like a nice like. He's been known to pump out a lot of really killer cats studio wise. I think we're gonna take a short break here, and then we will be back with the second half. All right, yo, welcome back. I'm gonna have Ben break us in here into some of the gear stuff since he is our resident bass trombone expert. What you got for us, Ben?
Yeah. So we've already talked a little bit about Ben Van Dijk being a time artist. So I was going to talk a little bit about the Time brand first before we talked about the specific trombones he ended up using. So yeah, Ben Van Dijk plays on Time instruments, and so the first thing I wanted to just kind of talk about was just the brand Time. It's so they're out of Germany. They are they mostly make brass instrument, or they only make brass instruments. So they do have one percussion instrument, which is a triangle. We talked a little bit about that off screen. Um, anyway, so now the Thein Instruments is operated by Max Thein and Olaf Brand. Ben Van Dijk helped develop their current bass trombone model they have. It's the BVD model. They've been working on it since the 80s. So apparently they just had multiple custom horns that they had been using with Ben, and you can actually buy these trombones in different configurations of some of their different artists. So like right here, I'm looking at the Ben Van Dijk model bass trombone, and it's a 9.5-inch bell, or 9 7/8 inch bell, which is 250 millimeters. And then what's interesting about these instruments, which Cody, you probably had some experience talking to some people about this, more so than myself, since I didn't really get to talk with many orchestra players, is the bore on this trombone is it's a dual bore 547 to 567 on the hand side, which is much smaller than most American bass trombone setups. You'll often hear this as like they'll use it in historical, like if they need a German trombone section or something like that, you'll hear people using these much smaller or more conically bored instruments. Cody, did you got to see some Thein instrument demonstrations? You got to actually mess with some of the horns. Did you notice anything like feeling way different?
Yeah, so I've actually played a Thein twice. The first time I was at Arkansas Tech in Russellville, Arkansas. I don't really remember what was going on. They had like a Thein artist day. I remember they had some people who were Thein artists play. And then Max Thein was there with his horns. That was the first time I ever saw them. And yeah, they do feel pretty different. It was a little jarring to me the first time. I just remember thinking like, "Whoa, that's crazy different." Now I can't remember. There should be noted that there's a lot of context with this. I can't remember what I was playing at that time. I think that would have been when I was at the University of Arkansas Little Rock, so I probably had switched over to my BAC at that point. But there's always this kind of like no place like home thing where whatever you play that's not your current setup is going to feel different, so that's always a factor. But it did feel different. They certainly make unique horns. They're not only known for this, but their jazz horn has a huge counterweight on the back. It's like a big circle. It looks like kind of like a cylinder that's like going in on itself, and it is kind of heavy. Like I remember thinking, wow, there's a lot of weight back here. And I don't know if that's intentional or not. But I played one of those. I played one of their concert horns. I did not play a bass trombone. I'm not a bass trombonist. We'll probably get into some of these pricings, but given what they cost, not being a bass trombone player, I wasn't looking to pick one up and and mess around with it. The last time I played a Thein instrument was this last ITF in Conway. Max was there as well as his assistant, and I played one of their concert horns. I think for some reason it didn't feel as different to me this last time. I mean, I will note that I haven't like taken a ton of playtesting. I've just kind of blown on them, but they definitely do feel a little different. And Max Thein is he travels a lot, I guess I should say. It's interesting, I've seen him twice. He is German, so it's interesting. I've seen him in Arkansas, of all places, twice. He must be on the road quite a bit. I remember the first time I seen him thinking he was very German. I mean, this could just be because I was in Arkansas and I'm not around a lot of German people, but I think he even had like a jacket that had like a little German flag thing on the side, so so it's definitely kind of a cool thing there. But yeah, I will say they feel a little different, man.
Yeah, and so I was looking at this. Like I said, it had that dual bore, which was interesting. It has changeable lead pipes, which I was reading more about Theins. Apparently, they're pretty modular horns, which is not uncommon nowadays. You have companies like Shires and Edwards doing the same thing. They even have their recommended mouthpiece that they have with the horn, which interestingly enough, I was looking up. A lot of Thein artists play on Thein mouthpieces, and sometimes they're the exact same ones. So on like if you're looking at Thein instruments, you can actually buy them in three different configurations, which is based on three Thein artists, which I think is interesting that their Ben Van Dijk model has three different artists who play it. You can actually buy these Ben Van Dijk model bass trombones in three different configurations. You can get like Ben Van Dijk's configuration, which comes with everything all the way down to the mouthpiece. You can get Brant Atima's bass trombone, same thing, everything all the way down to the mouthpiece, and then Ricardo Santos's. And they actually have some small differences. Like for some reason, Brant Atima's mouthpiece is a gold plated, while the Ben Van Dijk models is a silver plate. They also have two different metals. One is gold brass, the other is Thein. They call it K style, which it looks to be darker. Anyway, so yeah, that's Ben Van Dijk's primary bass trombone. He also had the other bass trombone that he can usually be seen playing or has been seen playing besides the custom BVD model bass trombone is going to be the Bartok model, which is specifically for Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra. There is a glissando from a B natural to an F. That is impossible in modern bass trombones without breaking it. And apparently this bass trombone has a trigger system that you actuate the F attachment with your middle finger while pushing out the F slide to an E with your thumb, because your thumb is stronger than your middle finger. So they say that you can push that slide out with a lever thumb. Other common tricks that people use to play that glissando and have been having the tuba player stand behind the bass trombone and actually push the slide in. And then and then apparently there's also like a shoelace connected to a trigger. But so yeah, that was also one that Ben Van Dijk played. He actually had on that one I found even a post that Ben Van Dijk did from it was in 1994. He was posing with a picture of this new trombone with this crazy mechanism on it. And in the comment section, Ben Van Dijk says, "Well, I don't have this horn." He talks about how it was actually the Netherlands Radio Orchestra or Philharmonic Orchestra that actually owned that bone. Which I'm glad to hear that they didn't ask him to buy his own horn for one song, because I believe when I was looking, the price on the Bartok models right around $9 to $10 grand. So that's pretty expensive for one song. So it's a good thing the orchestra owns it. And then Ben Van Dijk, another instrument that really the only other instrument you will find him playing is going to be the Ben Van Dijk model contra bass trombone. Contra bass trombones are really interesting because they are actually the first independent valves that, like, F contrabass trombones are the first independent valve instruments, and so there's actually not a lot of options there. His is tuned in F, B flat, and D. Has two Hogmann valves. These instruments are just absolutely stunning. I really suggest you get on his YouTube or something like this. Find videos of him playing this contra. It is a massive instrument. The grip on these, the way Thein does their grips too, looks pretty ergonomic. I don't know if you've seen those, Cody, but they actually have a tuning slide coming from one of the valves that actually supports that grip. So it's not some weird grip that's going to slide off. And actually, the trombone's weight is actually distributed over your hand, which if you play bass trombone, the ergonomics is kind of a big deal. And I couldn't imagine for contrabass trombone, it's got to be much worse, because holding a bass trombone, like, your hand starts to hurt. Contra, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I definitely would want a grip. I like super light little jazz horns, so I when I think about a big heavy trombone, I'd want a grip for sure. I was gonna say, I think, well, I know Brian Hecht is moving over to Tyne. I think he was previously a Shires artist, if I'm correct. I just know he posted a lot about it, like, right after I saw him at ITF. He was, like, in Germany working with Max to build a bass trombone. I don't know if they're going to have an artist horn. I would assume so. Brian Hecht is doing pretty well for himself recently as a soloist, so I'd be surprised if they didn't try and advertise that.
They might do it like they did with Brand Atima, was where they actually have the configurations. It might do something like that too, where it might fall under either the BVD or the Universal. They have another horn, the Universal horn, because, like I was just about to say, the BVD model contrabass trombone, it also comes in a Brand Atima configuration.
Nice.
But I will say the mouthpieces are the same, so I think Tyne just might make one contrabass mouthpiece. So
it's interesting. I really didn't know they had their own mouthpiece. That's interesting. I wonder how many other people are making mouthpieces that they recommend you play on. I know that Yamaha has mouthpieces, for example, but when I think of Yamaha artists, like none of them are playing on Yamaha mouthpieces that I can think of. I'm not saying they're not, but like for example, I know Wycliffe plays a Xeno, and I know he plays on a Pickett, for example, or Shires doesn't make mouthpieces to my knowledge. I mean, that would be it would surprise me if they did. Um, and I don't believe, and Edwards doesn't. I know there's a lot of people using Greg Black and Griego, and so I find it interesting that they have like a best mouthpiece for, because it seems like they usually veer apart whenever you get towards the top end of horns. Like the maker for the horns and the mouthpieces usually aren't the same person in terms of gear. But
So
I don't know.
I didn't do as much research on the construction of the mouthpiece and talking about how they actually make their mouthpieces or anything like that. I did try to look though to purchase a Thein mouthpiece, and I did notice that they don't advertise their mouthpiece selection on their website at all. You can't just go scroll and look through Thein mouthpieces, but you can buy these horns,
Interesting.
and they do have a spot where they say you can contact them and ask about it. But they do have spots on their configurations where you can see, like if you get the Brand Tema model, you get the gold plate. But if you want the Ben Van Dijk model, you get the silver.
Interesting. I will say that there's a cool video I saw. I don't even know where this is at. And I'm sure you could deep dive this of like Max Tyne in the shop talking about making horns, and he was talking a lot about not making horns that are generic for everybody. That like each player has their own identity, and like building horns in that vein to fit the player's needs as they grow and change too, and like being open to making a horn for someone, and then like as they shift in whatever way later on, bringing it back into the shop and changing it. So I find that interesting. It's certainly uh, a concept, and I know Max is like a generational builder. Like I'm not sure how far it goes back. I want to say like fourth generation trombone builder or brass maker or something.
So really, really interesting model with this contrabass deal. I don't think we talked a lot about Ben Van Dijk playing the contrabass, but as a bass trombonist, I don't have a lot of experience with a contrabass trombone. I've held one time. I was standing actually right next to Mick Ratz at ITF. He looked very disappointed. I think he knew that I was not actually in the market for contrabass trombone. But I got to play on one. Anyways, when I think contrabass trombone, I usually think when I think players, at least it's Ben Van Dijk. And so this is probably one of the most played on contrabass trombone to see, because you don't get to see recordings of a lot of big famous names playing on these instruments. But Ben Van Dijk really does give it a lot of love. And so if you are interested in hearing that, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners probably haven't heard a lot of contrabass trombone, Ben Van Dijk's got tons of content on it, and you can see these horns in action. And he does have different configurations in certain videos. You can tell they're making constant changes to the horns, like you were saying, Cody. Like it seems to be like it's a living model. Like I'm sure they're different from year to year, even.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. What, just out of curiosity, man, what would it cost me to get into a Tyne setup?
Okay, so if you're on the Tyne website, you're not going to get a price. However, you can go to places like Hot and Horns, who have actually a special order trombone section. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention that the Tyne Brian Hecht American 22. Yeah, that is on special order right now. You can get that from Hot and Horns on special order for about 11 grand. So, but if you wanted to get a Ben Van Dijk model, this is very generic, and obviously, if you're paying this much money, you're probably just going to talk to Max, and he's going to set it up the way you want it. But if you wanted the Ben Van Dijk model, it would be about 12 grand. So, and then if you wanted the Ben Van Dijk model contrabass trombone, that would cost you about 2016. So they're pretty pricey instruments. How a lot of people sing their praises. Yeah, I don't know. I've personally, as a bass trombone player, they look visually appealing, and I really want to try one out. But it's just horn. I really never got an opportunity to try. Wasn't ever around. Didn't see them the other times I came to Arkansas. But yeah, so he also plays. Since we did talk about flamenco guitar, he plays a Paco de Lucia model Cordoba F7. So I had to find that. We talked about how big of a deal Paco de Lucia was in the flamenco.
I was gonna say one cool thing. I was going through his Instagram, and he has an old picture of him playing a guitar that his son made. So his son actually also makes flamenco guitars.
Oh, wow, that is
which is I couldn't find anything else on it besides that, but the man said it from himself. So
that's actually really interesting. Yes, I definitely throughout all of this, as you explore about this guy, you get most interesting man in the world vibes. It's kind of a weird combination of flamenco and bass or contrabass trombone. And then I was also we were joking around about some Thein prices. Just to go back, another instrument I was able to find is the Thein and Buddy triangle. And this is a triangle you play. This is Thein's only percussion instrument. Those run about $655. $655 what I'm seeing right here. So once you get tax involved, you're looking at a $700 triangle. So yeah, hey, like the Thein stuff is pretty spendy when you look through it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, first of all, yeah, those flamenco guitars that his son makes, it's Eric Van Dijk who makes the flamenco guitar, and I know that one of the videos he has with him, he was talking about being the second guitar ever that Eric had made. So I am really curious if he currently builds them or if he does it as like a passion project. But speaking on $700 triangles, you know, I don't take a lot of strong, hard takes on the show, but I guess if a word of wisdom is, if you're gonna buy a $700 triangle, make sure you have $700 worth of triangle gigs in the future. That's all I'll say about it. Also, I mean, I don't know about the art of triangle building, but it is a triangle. And it's actually one piece of metal that's bent into three, not three pieces of metal. So, I don't know.
But yeah, I will say I don't have footage of Ben Van Dijk playing the Thein triangle, so I did just have to add that in because it was I would say a shocking fact I found when I was doing a little bit of research on.
Wait. Do they have artist? Do they have artist triangles or just generic triangles?
I apologize.
I was looking through and I saw sizes.
Okay, so first, it is actually already an artist triangle, and the reason I'm saying that is because if you go to their website, it is Buddy and Thein triangles, and this is talking about the percussionist Thomas or Buddy Hefs. He's a percussionist in the Stuttgart State Opera. So it is a collab between him
All right. So. Damn, you must be one hell of a triangle player to get your name on a triangle.
But anyways, yeah, so didn't see anything with him playing that. I actually didn't remember seeing that his son played or his son made flamenco guitars, so that's actually pretty interesting. But yeah, that's those are the instruments. Like I said, you'll see in old videos, which he's been doing for quite a while. You'll see in old videos how his trombones change. Thein changes those with him. Like, so you'll just see different Ben Van Dijk model bass trombones that are just also all different from each other because, well, it's kind of evolved over the years. seems like that's what they've done the whole time.
Speaking of videos, I was just kind of wanted to talk about his YouTube presence. And Jared, you wanna kick that off first? Talk about his YouTube, Facebook, social media presence, I guess.
Yeah, totally. So it's actually kind of surprising how hip he is to the internet, considered his age. But he's an OG like YouTube guy. Like his first video goes back 15 years ago.
Do you think that
So he's been
do
posting.
you think he would want you to call him an OG YouTube guy? And do you think he would
Yeah, I'm
understand
sure.
OG YouTube guy?
I'm sure he's hip enough to understand exactly what I'm talking about. I have no doubt about that. No, but for real though, he does have videos that go back of him playing 15 years ago, and he's been fairly consistent in posting videos since then. Like his most recent video was only a day ago, and the one before that was 2 weeks. So if you want just good trombone content from him, he's still constantly producing it, and it's all on YouTube. Like out of the 170 videos too, you're gonna find just like classic trombone repertoire. He posts a lot of just things he's interested in, which like looking around it it kind of gives a more sense of what he wants to be playing and what he finds interesting, which I think we should pay attention to. But
Yeah, man. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to mention you talked about his most recent video. I really like what. So I watched that. It was I watched one of his more recent videos. It could have been on Instagram, but I know I saw the original on YouTube. Posted a video of him playing Alexander Lizardev's concerto and or yeah, I believe yeah, concerto in one movement. And anyways, he had actually two different interpretations that he played. So they're completely different styles. One of them was like Stefan Schultz's style of it, and the other one was just completely different. He was taking pauses at different times and things like that. And he actually did a side by side comparison of him playing like the same song with two completely different interpretations. So I thought that was pretty cool that he did that. I don't think I've ever seen somebody else like do anything like that. So he's been on there long enough that he had like 20 years difference in recordings. You know, with rubato, things like that. Just the whole interpretation, which think about in the trombone world about somebody's interpretation of like classical pieces. We always think of them as being something so rigid that you don't think about different artists, different interpretations of the same piece. So I don't know. I like that he brought attention to that, which just this concept I hadn't even thought about until I started looking into some of that.
Stefan Schultz, by the way, if you don't know, is I believe German. I'm 80% sure he's German. German bass trombone player who is super killer. He's got really cool hair that flicks straight back. But definitely, I think it's interesting. Ben said Stefan Schultz style, and I'm trying to find words for this if you're not familiar with Stefan Schultz, but think very like I don't want to use the word edgy because that can get kind of weird, but like very bass trombone, like powerful. Um, Stefan Schultz, I'm a big fan of Stefan Schultz.
Yeah, it's cool. He posts a lot of the videos too with the sheet music on the screen edited in, so you can follow along. And so while it's like his channel is mostly just about his playing, it's definitely like an education channel too. Um, also speaking of just like different players, if you're trying to get to know other trombone players, his YouTube is also a great opportunity for that because he does a lot of collaborations with different trombonists, playing other people's songs. Again, like comparing how people play. It's just a great resource for that. But outside of YouTube, he's also pretty on top of it with his Instagram. Um, and that would be my recommendation for like the best way to keep up with what he's doing. He'll post a lot of the same videos on his YouTube to his Instagram, plus just like getting to know where he's playing. And again, for me, the best part is seeing who he's playing with, who he admires, because he'll talk about it. He'll post it, and then you can go figure that out for yourself too if you're not familiar with them. And speaking of just like how long he's been around. So he has a website. It's kind of outdated. You could just tell from it. It even says it's the second version of it, but it doesn't seem like he keeps up with it that much anymore. Especially considering his website links to his MySpace page. But he was hip enough back then to have a MySpace page. He still has a Facebook too. Pretty active on that. So,
Rest in peace, MySpace.
yeah, rest in peace, MySpace. Yeah, you could go to it and there's his top tracks. You can see his top tracks, but there's like everything else is missing at this point.
Is
Well,
MySpace
broken
still
links.
going? Can you get to MySpace?
I'm on myspace.com right now.
Bro, you know what? For all you listeners who got to this part of the episode, go check out our MySpace. I'm telling you right now, tomorrow I'm making a slideshow of MySpace. It's gonna be the coolest, hippest place on
Yeah.
the internet.
It's crazy. It's literally has the same bio as his like website too. But yeah. So, but he knows how to, produce the content for the people. He knows what we want,
Yeah,
and he does it really well.
I really do. I do think a lot of it's educational. Like I said, for us bass trombone players, it's really cool to get to see things like the contrabass things that you don't typically get to watch anything with solo content or anything like that. So he does have a lot of options from there, things like that to see. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, I was gonna say I watched a lot of his videos, and it looks like he's like in his office. He's got like, or in his house or wherever he works. I'm not really sure. He's got like his curtains up and stuff. And he plays a lot of flamenco on there too. If you're wanting to watch him play flamenco guitar, he calls himself like a flamenco hobbyist, but he's really good. Like I don't know. Like he says he's a hobbyist, but if you listen to him, he's not too shabby. But the other thing I was gonna say is like he sounds really good on there, and I mean not just in the fact
Yeah.
that like he's been Van Dijk, but that he records himself super well. It's actually I think it's crazy hard to record yourself like in your office and then put it on YouTube and it not sound terrible. Uh, the one that comes to mind, Michael Lake, who's the alto bone guy, he records himself really well, and he has a whole video talking about how he records himself. I think he's one of the better ones. But yeah, Ben Van Dijk is definitely, in my mind, like this is kind of a weird category of things to think about, but one of the best people on the internet at recording himself in his home studio and putting out a YouTube video. Because he did. I know he did a collab with Joe Alessi too, where I thought that sounded really good. I mean, I think if I was doing a collab with Jared, for example, like I think that would be like a real undertaking to get that to sound all right,
To be
so
to be fair, on those Joe Alessi videos, he does have other people actually help produce.
oh, interesting.
There are people who are credited on those. I will say that. So he has a team, but it shows that he values that too, like good production quality for sure.
Yeah, I guess that is interesting. He does. I guess that is kind of the overarching point is it does sound good. Like whatever, however he does it, you're not going to go there and it's going to sound like, oh, this is a guy who recorded it on his phone and tossed it up. Like he has a decent little recording set up in his home office or whatever.
Totally.
All right, well, I think it's gonna kind of wrap up. I kind of want to close up with just everyone's thoughts on Ben Van Dijk. We'll kind of go around the room. I guess like a fun way to do this would be like one, what was your impression of Ben Van Dijk before this episode, after doing the research, and just kind of his impact on you at large. I'll go first. Before I'll say that before and after hasn't changed too much. I was already a big Ben Van Dijk fan. Like I said, I think he's one of my favorite bass trombone players, and really just a lot of confirming. I will say I learned while doing the research of this a bunch about his local orchestras and stuff, which is kind of gives me a stronger idea of where he's from and kind of that personal build up in him. But yeah, I think his impact on me is just lyrical playing, and like once again, I'm not trying to trash on bass trombones who do this because I think it has its place, and I've been very impressed with some bass trombone players who lean into this. So I'm not trying to badmouth this, but some people play the bass trombone like it's a bass trombone. You know, it's they get the instrument and they think, okay, I'm gonna like have these bombs, if you will, like these low heavy notes, and like that can sound super cool. But I've always thought with Ben Van Dijk, he was past that musically, if you will. It's just like that's not his goal. His goal is to be lyrical and to sing on the trombone. I don't think that, we're talking about Ben Van Dijk's impact on the bass trombone. I don't think that Ben Van Dijk's impact is on the bass trombone. I think it's on the trombone at large. I think if you're a tenor trombonist and you're not familiar with Ben Van Dijk, you're doing yourself a disservice. There's a lot you can learn from his playing that's not bass trombone specific. He's like a very musical person. And I think that's the impact he's had on me, is just kind of a reminder of singing through the horn, which so many great orchestral guys give you. But it's fine. That's kind of where I'm at with it. So I guess, Jared, what you got before episode, after episode, and then his impact on you at large?
Yeah. So I know you guys roasted me about this before, and I hope the audience doesn't do it too. But I wasn't really familiar with him before this, actually. Most orchestra guys I just tend not to be because it's not the world I'm in, unfortunately. But since doing this episode, since doing the research, going through like his YouTube channel, absolutely like can agree with everything you just said about him. Like an incredible player. Super stoked to have all this like access to these videos, especially since for me, I don't know as much repertoire as you guys do. So a lot of these probably are like, oh sweet, he's playing this song. For me, it's probably new. And it's a great way to get into this world. Again, familiarize myself with all of it. Especially because I usually play on pea shooters, you know, classic jazz horns, but like seeing someone who could play with that much feeling, and you don't really, again, not no hate on the bass trombone, but you don't really think of it as like him as he's just a bass trombone player. He's definitely fits into the category of just a great trombone player.
Go ahead, bro. Sorry.
I was just going to say, sorry. I was just going to say, yeah, I agree with what Jared was saying. And, I wouldn't fault him for not knowing who he was. He's especially a tenor trombone player, not knowing who he was. Bass trombone players tend to seek out each other. So I was able to find him pretty early on, luckily.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things I always got from him, was the fact that he put out all those YouTube videos. I got to see a lot of the music that I would get to play early on. I would get to see somebody play that. And so when I was working up that Alexander Lebedev's concerto, I was able to go find a good recording of it pretty easily and got to see different artists. But I usually went to Ben Van Dijk's videos whenever I was trying to look at it. And a lot of times I would just listen to for like ideas on, how fast to take something or what to do in certain places, listen for where he's breathing, things like that. I would definitely say that's so that was huge for me whenever I was growing as a bass trombonist. And then I think there's a lot out there, but you talked about how he can familiarize you with repertoire. The music he plays on his YouTube stuff isn't stuff that's like incredibly hard. He does sometimes, but a lot of times he's playing stuff that's very approachable. And like you could tell he was a teacher, or you could tell he's a teacher because like he's playing like student level repertoire. And I think that's just better for the trombone community in general. That way things are more reachable. I don't know. So yeah, huge impact.
Yeah, man. I wanted to say too, kind of thinking about Jared talking about not knowing who Ben Van Dijk was, and Ben talking about kind of getting a laugh every time we were talking about bass trombone versus non-bass trombone. if you've gotten to this point in the episode and you didn't know who Ben Van Dijk is, I actually think that's pretty awesome. I mean, hopefully this is like opened a world for you. I mean, I don't like when people like big league people, if you will, where they're like, oh, you don't know this cat or you don't know this thing. I mean, I personally try to listen to so much stuff. Like, I really, one of my passions in life is seeking out music and musicians, and but like, kind of share a short little story here. When I was at that trombone day in Southern Miss, it was me, Matt Wright, who's in the symphony here, who's a good friend of mine, and two of his students, these younger girls, and they Marshall came out, and before he came out, I don't know why, but I looked over at them and I was like, "Are you guys big fans?" And they were like, "Oh, we don't know who he is," and you know, um, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're listening to this podcast and you're a trombone person, how could you not know who Marshall is? But I mean, I'm sure that was like such an amazing moment for them. I mean, I know personally that I wasn't super familiar with Ian Bousfield, who I'm now very familiar with, the first time I saw him. And it blew my mind. Like, I'll never get that moment back. When you see someone who's that good, um, just like these, like, I mean, real like mind changing musicians, people who like really put an impact on you. There's like a specialness to like discovering them. I mean, obviously, especially in person, I can't imagine what it was like hearing Marshall for the first time. Like they had, for example, whenever Marshall goes places, and I talked about this, everyone wants him to play puddle jumping all the time now, because that's like his standard, if you will. Like, everyone knows that tune, they know him playing it, and they expect him to play it. They're always blown away. They know he's gonna do the crazy pedal tone jumps, and they're always excited to hear it. But like, they didn't know what puddle jumping was, so for them, he just played a song, and I'm sure they've never heard another trombonist do that. That probably blew their mind that could happen. I had a similar experience because I was lucky enough to be with Ben in a tiny room where I got to watch Ian Bousfield play Blue Whales of Scotland. And if you don't know, he plays it at like a cajillion beats per minute. And, shit blew my mind. I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and so, that's kind of crazy examples. But yeah, like, if you don't know who Ben Van Dijk is and you just got to know this, like, that's awesome. Like, we sat here and talked about Ben Van Dijk for, I didn't time it, but I'm sure like an hour and a half or something, and all this is great, and I've told you a bunch of cool information, hope you can check it out, but really the biggest thing about Ben Van Dijk is, like, go listen to Ben Van Dijk. Like, his playing speaks for who he is. Like, he's a fantastic musician, and, yeah, like, I think it's super sick, and, like, I think both Jared and Ben hammered on this. He has a ton of resources, which is super killer. I mean, I think that's something that we're trying to do here. Like, we talk a lot about the goals of this podcast, but certainly one of them is for exposure of the trombone. And like, yeah, if you don't know who Ben Van Dijk is, like, that's a huge window into learning about Ben Van Dijk, but also a lot of bass trombone stuff, like Ben was saying, like repertoire. Gonna talk about album rec for the week is Nana by Ben Van Dijk. We talked about it earlier. I'll briefly kind of go back to it here real quick. Not gonna do the whole thing because we had to talk about it, but it's got Nana is the Spanish word for lullaby. We said that. It's got New Orleans by Boza, which is kind of a big bass trombone piece. He has some cool. He's got The Chief, which is dedicated to George Roberts. I'm sorry. God, Arnold Jacobs. I'm sorry, because I'm looking at both of them. The Chief, dedicated to Arnold Jacobs, famous tuba player, and then Mr. Roberts, which is dedicated to George Roberts. He's got Dances for Tenor and Bass, which is Ben Van Dijk and Joe Alessi, and then Vexilia Regis and Locus Iste, which is him with Joe Alessi, David Finlayson, and Don Harwood, who were the New York Phil section. So yeah, go check that out. He sounds incredible. And of course, Nana, and you can also hear him play a little bit of the flamenco guitar if you're interested in that. So as always, I want to say thanks for listening. What's up, Ben? You're muted.
I was gonna say on Locus Iste and Maxilla Regis, he's actually playing contrabass on that. That is a alto, tenor, bass, and contrabass section as a German style trombone quartet. So it's an interesting listen if you haven't heard that. So
yeah, like we say, he also had a huge impact on the contra. Maybe the most famous contra player of all time. I don't know. That's like a more subset group, but he's certainly already huge on the bass trombone. It's hard to believe. What I think coming to mind is like I know Brant Tatema, we talked about a lot in this episode, plays on the contra, but yeah, he's probably the guy, you know. But yeah, go check that album out. As always, thank you guys so much for listening, and happy shedding.